And we've got a really intense source this time.
Yes, an alert.
Imagine being declared dead for 48 hours and then waking up in a morgue.
It's hard to even fathom.
You sent us this one. It's the personal testimony of Pastor Alex Rodriguez from his YouTube channel, De la Tumba a la Vida, Pastor Alex Rodriguez.
That's right, from the tomb to life.
And wow, it's unlike anything we've really explored before, isn't it?
Absolutely. Pastor Rodriguez recounts this, well, utterly transformative event, a really catastrophic car accident back in February '92.
Right.
And the sequence of events that followed is just almost unbelievable, including being declared deceased for 2 full days.
Yeah. So our goal here, our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the timeline he presents.
Exactly. Follow the progression, understand the key events he describes from the crash itself right through to his recovery.
And get a sense of the impact this whole experience had on him as he tells it. We're focusing on his narrative.
Straight into the heart of his testimony.
Okay, so let's set the scene. February 22nd, 1992. Pastor Rodriguez is driving with his wife, Ana Gabriela, and 2 of their daughters, Amy Gabriela, who is 21, and little Heed Gabriela, just 4 years old.
Okay.
They were heading to Yancey, Texas, and it was actually supposed to be a celebration.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was Ana Gabriela's and Heed's birthday, both born February 22nd, apparently at 11:30 a.m.
Wow, same day, same time.
That's what he says. Their middle daughter, Alex Gabriela, wasn't with them. She'd stayed back in San Antonio. The plan also involved stopping in Acuña, Mexico, to pick up a Christian mariachi band.
So a family trip, a celebration?
Exactly. And then disaster struck.
Collusion.
Yeah. An 18-wheeler truck hit their car on the side. Pastor Rodriguez says it crushed the roof completely.
And what's really striking right from the start is the timing he gives.
You mean the birthday connection?
Yes, but also the exact time of the crash. He states it happened at 11:30 a.m. on February 22nd.
The precise moment of their birthdays.
Precisely. That detail, whether exact or symbolic for him, it really emphasizes the personal weight of that day, you know?
Definitely adds another layer. And in those moments, right after the impact, he describes these incredibly poignant goodbyes.
Amidst the wreckage.
His 21-year-old Amy Gabriela apparently hugged him, told him she loved him.
Oh, wow.
And little Heed, the 4-year-old, blew him kisses and said, "I love you, Daddy." His wife, Ada Gabriela, also said she loved him.
That's incredibly difficult to imagine, those final words.
It paints such a heartbreaking picture, doesn't it?
It really does. That exchange, as he remembers it, it just speaks volumes about their connection and, well, magnifies the horror of what was happening.
And the horror was immense. The injuries he describes, they're almost unbelievable.
Yeah, the physical trauma.
He states his eldest daughter, Amy Gabriela, was severed in half by the truck.
Oh, my goodness.
And he, the youngest, was thrown from the car, hit a guardrail, and landed in water. He said she was in the water for 48 minutes.
48 minutes. Submerged. That's highly significant medically, if accurate.
Absolutely. His wife, Ana Gabriela, had severe head and leg injuries. And Pastor Rodriguez himself. The list is just staggering.
Go on.
Okay, so fractured skull, a broken leg, bone protruding through the skin, a crushed foot, multiple fractures of the femur, that's the thigh bone.
Right.
Pelvis, ribs, clavicle, collarbone, arms, hands, ankles. Oh, and his spine, fractured in 12 places.
12?
Plus a cut tongue and ruptured eardrums. The sheer scale is hard to grasp.
It is. The violence of that impact, based on that list of injuries, is just profound. It makes his survival story, as he tells it, even more, well, extraordinary.
Help did arrive fairly quickly, according to his account. Ambulances, helicopters. He says Amy Gabriela, his eldest, was taken by a mortuary ambulance.
Okay, implying she was deceased at the scene.
That seems to be the implication. He, his wife, and Heed were airlifted to Herman Hospital in Houston.
Right. Critical care needed, obviously.
But things got worse on the flight.
In the helicopter.
Yeah. He describes massive blood loss. And he says his wife and daughter seemed unresponsive by them.
Oh, no.
But he mentions this one moment amidst all that. He spoke to his wife, and he felt her squeeze his hand.
A sign of consciousness, or connection at least.
A small flicker, yeah.
Yeah.
But then his account takes a different turn.
The spiritual experience.
Exactly. He says he saw a man described as being in a bright light with 3 other figures.
Okay.
And he heard a voice. It identified itself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jesus of Nazareth.
Right.
And it apparently promised him life in abundance, told him not to be afraid.
So this becomes a really crucial moment in his understanding of everything that follows.
It seems that way. It provides this framework of divine intervention for him.
A lens through which he views the trauma and survival. It's a core part of his narrative.
Following that experience, he says he told his wife he was leaving.
Leaving, as in dying.
That's how it sounds.
Ugh.
He then describes the sensation of his spirit actually leaving his body.
An out-of-body experience.
That's what he claims. He says he watched the paramedics trying to revive him, saw them work on him until they stopped.
And declared him dead.
Covered him with a sheet, declared him dead. He says he witnessed it all.
That's a profound claim, witnessing your own death declaration from outside your body.
So, the helicopter, now carrying what they believed was his body,
Right.
was diverted. They didn't go to Herman anymore. They went to Ben Taub Hospital, also in Houston.
Okay, Ben Taub often handles trauma and, well, county cases, including morgue facilities.
And it's at Ben Taub, in the morgue, where the story gets even more detailed and extraordinary.
Go on.
He recounts being examined by a Dr. Morgan. This doctor officially pronounced him dead, documented all those injuries we listed.
Just standard procedure.
Then he describes being prepared for an autopsy, and the details here are quite graphic. He mentions them cutting his arms to access veins for embalming fluid, inserting the fluid, removing bodily waste.
These are, again, consistent with postmortem preparations, especially if an autopsy or preservation is planned.
Right. He then says a justice of the peace came, signed the death certificate, time of death noted as 1:30 p.m., February 22nd.
Official documentation.
Then, placed in a body bag, tag on his toe, and taken to a refrigerated morgue. He specifies the temperature, 20 degrees below zero, Fahrenheit, presumably.
Minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. That's very cold, standard for morgue refrigeration to slow decomposition. The level of detail is quite specific.
It is. And his recollection of these procedures, while apparently deceased, that's the crux of it, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It challenges our basic understanding of consciousness, life, and death.
So he's in the morgue, declared dead, certificate signed, and then the return. He describes his spirit re-entering his body after, well, he says sometime, and he mentions hearing voices.
What voices? Who's...
People coming to get his body. He says it was after the mandatory 48 hours had passed.
Okay, the 48-hour waiting period. That's often a protocol, yeah, to confirm death beyond any doubt before release.
And the moment he describes coming back to life is just cinematic. He says, as two men were moving his body on a gurney, his arm twitched.
Just twitched.
Yeah. Apparently startled them so much they dropped the gurney.
I imagine they would be startled.
And then, he says, he opened his eyes and smiled at one of them.
Smiled. After being dead for 2 days in a freezer?
That's the account. He says the man he smiled at just fled, ran away terrified.
You can't blame him, can you, if that happened? Wow. A sudden sign of life after all that would be profoundly shocking.
It defies conventional medical understanding, absolutely. Especially after 48 hours in those post-mortem steps.
Completely.
So what happened immediately after he, woke up?
Right, well, he's still in the body bag at this point.
Still zipped up.
Apparently. He describes struggling inside it, trying to get out. Eventually, he says, a large group of personnel arrived. He puts the number at 33. 33 people. Responding to the man who came back to life in the morgue.
That's his claim. And he says he started talking to them right then and there about God.
While being freed from a body bag.
Yes. And he claims that 35 people, including the two morgue attendants who dropped him, accepted Christ because of what they witnessed.
Another instance of immediate, large-scale spiritual impact in his narrative.
Very much so. So, from the morgue at Ben Taub, he's rushed back to Herman Hospital.
Back to the initial trauma center.
For more surgery. A lot more surgery. He highlights one doctor in particular, a Dr. Muma.
Okay.
He says this Dr. Muma operated on him for 28 hours straight.
28 hours? That's an incredibly long operation. Speaks volumes about the damage.
Focusing mainly on the head and leg injuries, he says.
Yeah.
He had a tube inserted in his lower leg and underwent spinal surgery for those 12 fractures.
Extensive critical interventions. It's amazing he survived the surgery, let alone the initial trauma and everything else.
Following the surgery, Pastor Rodriguez states he was in a coma for a full year.
A year-long coma. That's a very prolonged period of unconsciousness.
And during that year, he believes God gave him a new ability.
Which was?
The understanding of 12 languages.
12 languages. Learned while comatose.
That's his belief. Adding to the two, He says he already knew. He mentions being a medical surgeon with a degree from Baylor University.
Okay, so he's claiming fluency or understanding acquired supernaturally during the coma. That's highly unusual, medically speaking.
To say the least.
Mm-hmm.
He also mentions being on a special rotating bed, likely to prevent bed sores and complications.
Standard for long-term immobile patients, yes.
And that later, 6 different doctors told him the prognosis was grim. He'd be in a wheelchair for life.
Given the 12 spinal fractures, that prognosis isn't surprising from a medical standpoint initially.
Right. But his journey wasn't over. He then describes a period after the coma, 2.5 years where he was mute and deaf.
So no speech, no hearing for 2.5 years.
Correct. Until another event he describes as miraculous.
What happened?
He was in a chapel, praying intensely. He described sudden severe pain and then bleeding from his ears and mouth.
Bleeding and then...
And then he says his speech and hearing were restored. Just like that.
Wow. Another sudden dramatic turnaround attributed to prayer and a physical event.
Yeah. But amidst these recovery milestones, there was also profound sadness.
His daughter, Heed.
Yes. 4 years after the accident, February 22nd, 1996, the same date again.
The birthday date.
Heed, who'd been in a vegetative state since the crash, passed away at Herman Hospital.
Oh, that's heartbreaking after 4 years.
He recounts this final, incredibly moving interaction, though. He says she suddenly appeared lucid, spoke to him, and the family gathered there.
Spoke. After being vegetative.
He says she mentioned seeing Jesus, her mother, Anna Gabriella, who presumably also passed, though he doesn't detail her outcome here, and her sister Amy shared messages of love.
Goodness.
Including reminding them of a promise about God restoring things 7-fold. He claims 185 family members were there, plus 2 doctors and 3 nurses, and they all accepted Christ right then at her bedside.
Another large conversion event tied to a profound moment. The emotional weight of that part of the story is immense.
Absolutely. So after all this, the accident, the death declaration, the coma, the recovery, the loss of his daughter after 4.5 years total in the hospital.
4.5 years.
Pastor Rodriguez finally went home. It's still in the wheelchair.
Right. The prognosis was lifelong wheelchair use.
But there's one more miracle in his account. He describes a Saturday night at home. A visiting preacher had prayed for his healing earlier, but nothing seemed to happen immediately.
Okay.
Later that night, at midnight exactly, he notes this time again, saying he always gets hungry at midnight since his death.
Interesting detail.
As he was about to wheel himself to make a sandwich, he says he had a vision. A white cloud descending.
A vision.
And a voice declaring he would rise from his wheelchair before midnight. He also says his Bible fell open to relevant scriptures.
Okay, and
then, he says, he just stood up and walked.
just like that, after years in the chair and the dire prognosis.
Miraculously stood up and walked, surprising his family completely. That's the final piece of his physical recovery story.
It's a climactic moment in his narrative, defying the medical predictions entirely through what he describes as divine intervention.
One final kind of a mysterious point he makes. Remember Dr. Muma, the surgeon?
Yes, the one who performed the 28-hour operation.
Pastor Rodriguez says he later tried to find him. Looked for him in Africa, apparently. Couldn't find him. No trace. And Pastor Rodriguez suggests he believes Dr. Muma wasn't actually human. He thinks he was an angel.
An angel performed the surgery.
That's his belief. And he adds, quite assertively, that this is documented somewhere at Ben Taub Hospital.
That's a fascinating and very bold claim.
Yeah.
An angelic surgeon with supposed documentation. It adds yet another layer of the extraordinary to this whole account.
It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, Pastor Alex Rodriguez's entire account, from start to finish, is just packed with these incredible events.
It is, from the devastating crash and the period of being declared dead.
Right, for 48 hours.
To the spiritual encounters he details, the morgue experience, and then the series of claimed miraculous recoveries. It's an intensely personal story.
And a really powerful perspective on, well, faith, tremendous loss, and what seems like unbelievable resilience.
Definitely. And we know, hearing this deep dive into his testimony, it probably raises a lot of questions for listeners.
Oh, for sure.
It touches on these huge themes: tragedy, faith, what happens after death, miracles, things that resonate deeply and, frankly, can be seen very differently depending on your own beliefs.
Yeah, your own framework for understanding the world. But what makes his narrative so gripping, I think, are those specific details he includes.
Like the timing.
Exactly. The accident hitting on the birthdays, the incredibly graphic descriptions of the injuries, what he says happened in the morgue.
Mm-hmm. The voice he heard, that moment of waking up and smiling.
Yeah. And that final, profoundly emotional scene with his daughter, Heed. These aren't vague claims. They're vivid moments he paints.
They are, and regardless of how one interprets the, let's say, the metaphysical aspects,
Right.
his experience, as he tells it, undeniably highlights the sheer impact of severe trauma, but also the human capacity for hope, for perseverance against overwhelming odds.
You can absolutely see why he feels compelled to share it. His desire to tell this story of life from the tomb, as he puts it. It's clearly central to his life now.
It's a testament to his journey, no doubt.
So, thinking about everything we've just unpacked, what parts of Pastor Rodriguez's detailed account really stick with you? What resonates or maybe challenges your own understanding of, life, death, faith, the limits of medicine?
It's a lot to process.
It really is. His story, the one you brought to us, it kind of invites you to consider the power of personal testimony, doesn't it? And maybe the mysteries that still lie just beyond our everyday grasp.
It certainly does. It's a narrative that forces you to think about the boundaries between life and death, between the physical and the spiritual, between the explained and the unexplained.
Yeah. It's definitely a story that
Yeah.
it'll likely stay with you for a while.
Indeed. It leaves you contemplating the nature of experience itself and the profound, sometimes inexplicable ways people navigate unimaginable hardship.